in the meantime, the hearing aid manufacturers kept telling us that hearing aids were improving, but my patients, and I was in a practice that had been in existence since the late 50s, early 60s. I had clients, I saw second and third generation clients with severe and profound hearing loss, and they kept complaining. Okay, so let's talk just very briefly why consumers need assistive technology. Simple reason that, and this is a gross generalization, but hearing aids at best correct the hearing loss about 50%. And this comes from a little chart from Drs. Greer, Clark, and Chris English. And it shows that, of course, the more hearing loss you have, the more residual post-fitting hearing deficit there's going to be. I mean, you've all said hearing aids are not like eyeglasses, right? Hearing aids don't restore hearing to normal. Hearing aids also don't restore auditory processing issues. So I don't know if any of you speak English as a second language, but I do. And I have trouble when people speak fast. I have trouble when there's background noise, and I have a lot of trouble when people have heavy-duty accents. So I was part of the original Quicksin test development, and I couldn't believe it that there were times that I did poorer on that Quicksin test than some of my clients. And it was really because I speak English as a second language. And of
Juliette,
course, yes,
do you have a hearing loss? I'm sorry.
I do. I am starting to have a high-pitch hearing loss. Yes, why?
Okay. Oh, I was just curious. You were talking about your challenges. I was wondering if it was just because of the second language or because you had a hearing loss
It's the
as
second
well.
language. It's the second
Okay, thank you.
language.
Thank you.
So, you know, I've been here 40 years, and obviously when I moved here, I was in my early 20s. But yes, I swim in a wonderful gene pool. My father could stand under a smoke alarm and not hear it. I don't know if you have family members like that. And my mom is 94 and has been wearing hearing aids for 17 years. So, yep, I know where I'm going. All right. And of course, directional microphones have their limitations. They work best if the ear is occluded. But so many of us are fitting open fit hearing aids. And of course, directional microphones really are most effective when the noise is about 2 arms lengths away or nearer. That's called near field background noise. So if the noise is coming from 10, 20, 30 feet away, a directional microphone is going to be of less benefit. And then the biggest one of all, the microphone that are in the hearing aid. And that's no one's fault. It's the limitation of the hearing aid. And I just realized that I forgot to turn my sound on. And I don't know. I'm going to stop share. Sorry about that. This is what happens when you do that, right? Can you
Are you wanting to play a video or?
Yes, I'm wanting to play an audio. So I know what just happened. If I share my screen and I don't share the computer sound, I'm sure all of you have had this very issue happen with presentations. I think I've corrected it. Can everybody see my video again? Yeah, okay, good. So I made a recording with my iPhone in a restaurant, and I was holding the iPhone right on my ear. And while this woman is talking about hearing aids, she's the wife of a person who wears hearing aid, I move the microphone to her mouth. So I have long arms. It's about a 2 feet distance. And then I moved the microphone of the iPhone back. And what you're seeing there is a screenshot from my iPhone. But here's the sound of that recording.
I put on a pair of glasses and I'm good. Doesn't make any difference with it, right? And I think, although as you get older and you get into the presbyopia, it does get more difficult. So you do have to. But I think for the most part, people think that glasses are the same as that hearing aids are the same as glasses, right?
No, they're not.
And they're not. They have much more limited use than glasses do. Because glasses really do make your vision.
That's the effect of a microphone. And we can't change that, right?
I put on.
Yep, we're going to skip on that. And in the meantime, for those of you who've been fitting hearing aids for many years, hearing aid improvements have gone forward in the last 25 years. And I'm sure many of you recognize some of the technology on my screen. K-amps, Zeta noise blockers. Did anybody try those hearing aids? All mine went back to the company. They didn't do a darn thing. I fit Ensoniq hearing aids. I fit Resound programmable hearing aids. I dove headfirst into Widex, 100% digital hearing aids. And of course, we're looking at very sophisticated hearing instruments at the moment. But complaints remain. And that's because hearing aids are in effect microphones on people's ears. And that means our clients continue to complain about understanding TV in background of noise or in large public venues. And I'm going to kind of skip over very quickly about a fairly recent Consumer Reports survey among 12,000 users. And I want to draw your attention to the features. There were product features and then performance that was evaluated. And what you're seeing here is that conversation in quiet, just about every hearing aid gets 1 thumbs up. 2 little arrows is what I would call 2 thumbs up. So most hearing aids get a 1 thumbs up, right? But look what happens when people are in background of noise. Almost all hearing aids get 2 thumbs down. Then when we look at talking on a cell phone, the results are kind of maybe 1 thumb up, but kind of just neutral, not the greatest. And of course, listening to television. And it again, like cell phone and television, those results are about the same, but we all know that there's a really good solution for helping our patients hear television. But you know, when you look at this graph, and I get Consumer Reports, I've had it for 40 years in my mailbox, I look at those red little arrows and I go, hearing aids don't work so well in background of noise. So how can our clients overcome hearing aid limitations? Because really, this is when you put your counseling hat on and you hand out forms, perhaps better communication strategies, and this is where you start counseling your clients. And in a nutshell, if a client complains that he or she is unable to hear a daughter-in-law, provided the hearing aids are properly fit and verified, then there are 2 options. And the 2 options are asking the daughter-in-law to speak louder or asking the daughter-in-law to move closer. Those are the 2 options. Of course, that includes speaking clearly and facing the person and turning down the background noise. But those are the 2 things that help because it improves the signal to noise ratio. And that's what our clients really respond to. Second option for the daughter-in-law, if they're going to be in a restaurant, use a remote microphone. And the third option, if this is in a public situation, the daughter-in-law is a minister in a church, that's when they want to use the assistive listening system. So the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities law, is written to benefit our clients, and indirect is written to benefit us, right? So under the law, assistive listening systems are to be installed in places where audible communication is integral to the use of the space. And then the question should be, under what conditions? Well, where PA systems are in use, except, and there's one exception, courtrooms. Even if the courtroom doesn't use a PA system, courtrooms shall always offer assistive technology. And in what kind of spaces are these systems to be installed? Well, the sky's the limit here. Classrooms, public meeting rooms, auditorium, airports, stadia, convention center, churches, and always in courtrooms. And facilities are required to provide receivers, either with headphones or earbuds or the little shells that you hang on the ear. But the receivers, 1 out of every 4 receivers, must be hearing aid compatible. And hearing aid compatible means that the receiver must come equipped with a neck loop. And of course, to be hearing aid compatible, the user has to have a telecoil inside the hearing aid. Now, that brings up a question from a study that was published in the Hearing Review, written up by Sergei Kochkin and a whole bunch of other people, including me, where over 200 people responded to the question. And did your audiologist tell you? Did your hearing instrument specialist tell you about telecoils? And 1 out of 3 people said yes. The other 65% either said no or didn't remember. And I suspect that in the people who said no, a significant number may have been told, but perhaps didn't remember. The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, recognizes 3 different types of systems. They are FM, infrared, or hearing loop systems. Currently, you may see some advertising, or you may see some AV companies advertising that they can do audio via Wi-Fi. Number 1, those systems don't meet the ADA because they require the user to bring their own device. These systems do not provide devices to the venue. Number 2, and hey, let's just back up here for a second. Do you want my mother in your church messing with her cell phone? And the answer is no, you don't, because she doesn't really know how to use her smartphone, and there is no way that she's going to know how to link and pair her device, even if she wanted to, right? But the second reason those audio over Wi-Fi systems don't work very well is that they have a huge lag, a huge delay that I have heard from consumers makes it impossible to hear. It's like such a loud audio delay that they can't listen to music or they can't listen to speech because of very strong echoes. Now, these systems that are recognized, the FM and infrared systems, require every consumer to pick up a device. So let's say you go to the theater, you're going to see Hamilton, you need to go to the service desk and pick up a receiver. And like I mentioned earlier, the ADA requires that 1 out of every 4 devices is equipped with a way to link to a hearing aid and a telecoil, meaning it needs to be equipped with a neck loop. And here's a big problem. That second part of the ADA law didn't come into existence until about 12 years ago. And suddenly outfits started equipping their FM or infrared devices with neck loops, and they were an afterthought. And frequently they weren't perfectly matched to the device. So a lot of these neck loops are not strong enough. They're also not a good solution for transient situations. And infrared systems, trust me, you're not going to want to sit behind my son in the theater. He's 6'5" and he's like this. And if you're a 5'3" woman, you're going to have a really hard time picking up that infrared signal because his body is going to be blocking it. And I don't know about you, but for about 25 years, I tried my patients to use these devices and they didn't bother. They didn't want to be bothered with any type of system. So on the right, you see a device that is incompatible. It's an older picture, I will admit that. But what is a person with severe hearing loss going to do? They're going to have to take their hearing aids out in order to make this work, and it's never going to be loud enough. On the left, you see an image of a device that has a neck loop, and these are made by a sweet Audio Comfort. And actually, these have very good neck loop devices. How are you going to know, or how are you going to teach your clients to know what type of assistive system is offered? On the left, obviously, some of those signs say in big bold letters, hearing loop, so it's pretty self-explanatory, but I draw your attention to the letter T. If the symbol has a letter T, it refers to telecoil, and this has become the standard symbol, the standard signage for places that have installed hearing loops. On the right are images of systems that require the user to go to a service desk and pick up a device. And there's all kinds of problems with these devices. Sometimes the headphones are intermittent, sometimes the headphones are dirty. Obviously, many places don't offer neck loops. The batteries have to be maintained. In my church, they were older devices. If you dropped them, the tuning went out of whack. And so,
No, I didn't.
okay. So really, that brings it back to the only system that is directly hearing aid compatible, and that's a loop system. And why or how does a loop system work? The sound from the speaker via the microphone on the lectern, it's a tiny little image right here. That signal is picked up by the microphone, broadcast to the PA system, as well as the hearing loop amplifying system. Frequently, those are integrated by the AV engineer. The loop amplifier will push an alternating current through the wire that encircles the audience, but frequently it's an array of wires that the telecoil can pick up. And what's the coolest part about this system is that in this type of system, the microphone on the lectern becomes the microphone to the hearing aid. So it's very much of using that, moving that microphone from far away, close to the mouth of the speaker, and people hear that presenter as if they're 8 inches away from his mouth. So the benefit to the user is that the signal to noise ratio increases dramatically, okay? I have, the reason there's such a difference in signal to noise ratio improvement is that it varies from the type of hearing aid and ear mold that's being used. So if you have an open fit ear mold and noise can still get into the ear, the signal to noise ratio improvement is going to be less than if you're dealing with a fully occluding ear mold. But I'll just quick play a recording in a church out of the loop.
The second lesson, be patient, therefore, beloved, until the coming. The second lesson.
And I'll play this one.
The second lesson, be patient, therefore, beloved, until the coming of the Lord. The second lesson.
It's a huge improvement. One word or a couple of words about the hearing loop standard, because some of you may have been in practice for a long time and you've heard that hearing loops don't work, hearing loops don't sound good, hearing loops cannot be installed in places where there's a lot of metal. We have overcome, or not me personally, hearing loop engineers have overcome this. Here there is an international hearing loop standard. And for those of you who are familiar with the 60118 standard, it's the same European standard that is being used for hearing aids. So the 60118 make sure that all loops are around the world meet the same standard, that they have a very broad frequency response, that they have a very strong signal, and best of all, that they're not installed in facilities where EMI can be an issue, electromagnetic interference. Now, another word about electromagnetic interference. I was in a hearing instrument specialist office in St. Joseph, Missouri, and his waiting room was right next to the place where all the electrical wiring came into the building. And he says, you know, I hear buzzing when I turn my telecoils on in my hearing aids. And I turned my hearing aid on, and I had a WHS hearing aid with me. And I'm listening, and I'm going, I don't hear the buzzing. He says, you don't hear the buzzing? He said, I hear it very loud in this hearing aid. And he's listening to a hearing aid with a stethoscope. And I said, give me your hearing aid. Let me try it. He had a resound hearing aid. And apparently, now this is about 6-7 years ago, the resound hearing aid did not have nowhere near the noise suppression that the WHS hearing aid had in the telecoil mode. Now, since I've been very vocal to the hearing aid companies, and I'm assuming that a lot of the hearing aid companies are doing a much better job of internally filtering out some of the EMI that hearing aids can pick up. I also know that Mead Killian owns a patent in EMI reduction in hearing aids. Hearing loops come in a number of different configurations, and I'm showing you two configurations. The configuration on the left is called a phased array hearing loop. It can be installed in one classroom right next to the next classroom. This is how schools for the deaf and the hard of hearing in the Scandinavian countries handle this. On the right is a perimeter hearing loop, where there's a perimeter wire strung around a facility. That type of loop can provide a very strong even signal, but there's always a but, there is some overspill. And there's good and bad things about overspill. There's bad things about overspill if this happens in a courtroom and you can stand outside and hear all the proceedings inside the courtroom. But if you belong to St. Raphael's Church and you go to the bathrooms are adjacent to the sanctuary, you can still hear Father Doug speak while you go into the bathrooms. So that's what overspill does. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing if there's two rooms side by side that are looped. Then there are also small hearing loop systems, countertop hearing loop systems. On the left is a system that was installed at a library. The microphone is attached to the monitor of the librarian, the information desk. On the right is a post office in the UK, and over, I forget what the number is, 10,000, 11,000 post offices in the United Kingdom are all the transactions are handled behind glass, and every post office in the United Kingdom has a hearing loop installed, has a speech transfer. There is a small speaker right here at the bottom, and in the behind the glass, the sales clerk uses a microphone, and these loop systems work remarkably well. In this country, we're starting to see a little uptick in what are known as portable loops, and I want to show you what a portable loop looks like. It's not very big. It can be very portable, so to speak. What I like about it, it has a light. So if the loop is on, there's a light that works, can be connected to a nice gooseneck microphone and will work behind glass or plexiglass. There's a group in Oregon, in the Eugene area, that is using these loops and has been very successful. I heard that just today, at the airport in Eugene, all the counters, the service desk counters at the airport have been looped. With this, I don't know if it's this particular type of loop, but they are providing hearing loop assistance. And just to show you what a consumer fairly recently said about trying a loop at the Shed Aquarium, and this is a woman who wears 2 cochlear implants, very hard of hearing. She wrote this letter the same day that she went there. She said, I couldn't believe I could hear the people behind the glass. I could hear every word. And that I could hear every word comes back time and time again when people try hearing loops. Just to show you more applications, loops are used in information points in the subway in New York. They can be used in taxi cabs. They're being used in trams, in the accessible bathrooms in Australia at the airport. So if you go to Brisbane, bring your hearing aids so you can hear in the bathrooms. This is for emergency messages. If you're stuck in a bathroom nursing a baby or changing a baby and there's an emergency, this will allow you to hear in that particular location. Back in 2014, I completed a small study with Sergei Kochkin about the benefits of having telecoils in hearing aids, and over 800 people participated in this study. And we asked them 2 questions. How do you rate the performance of your hearing aids in a place where you know there's a loop? How do you hear out of the loop on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 means I heard nothing and 10 meant I heard every word? And how well did you hear in the loop? And so you can see on this little card on the screen, this person at St. Rafe's, happens to be my Catholic church, but this was after I left my practice in 2012 already. This person rated his ability to hear Father Doug a number 2, and in the loop, he or she rated his or her ability to hear in the loop a 9. The aggregate data is overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming. On average, people rated their hearing ability a 5, a 4.9, and 13% said they could hear an 8, a 9, or a 10. Now, these are your star performers. These are your hearing aid clients who do extremely well. If you do quick SIN testing, these are your clients who have a quick SIN of 1 or 2. But you can see only less than 14% rated their ability to hear that well in a particular venue with a loop. Out of the loop, they rated their hearing, or in the loop, they rated their ability an 8.7, and 85% rated their hearing ability an 8 or higher. Now, the simplest explanation is this. I'm just going to remove the microphone from my mouth and hold it 2 feet away. And now I'm going to move my microphone back to my mouth. I'm assuming that all of you could hear the difference. And this is exactly what's happening in a loop. They're hearing the sound as clear as it's ever going to be. Now, granted, if I do this, it's never going to be clear. So there are people in this survey who say, even in the loop, I hear a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. These are your clients who have such poor discrimination that they really ought to be referred for a cochlear implant. These are their limitations, right? And that's when you get unsolicited, mind you, comments from users who have used a loop. I didn't have to work so hard. So this is what it must be to hear normal. I could hear things my wife couldn't hear. Notably, they can hear the wine being poured in the chalice, or they can hear the minister lick his lips. And I think this is the last comment. I don't think folks with normal hearing can appreciate just how awesome it is. Now, I'm not the only person. There are plenty of consumer advocates on the web who praise hearing loops to no end. This is Sherry Eberts. This is from a newsletter from California. The HLAA organization, telecoils are the best thing since sliced bread. This is from a loop advocate in the state of Washington who was questioning why there's such a gap between hearing loops and access options. You know, where is the issue? You know, why don't we see more assistive technology being used? Another advocate that you're probably familiar with from Hearing Technology Matters. This is Gail Hannon. So let's just kind of quick review what's important about telecoils. When you are going to program a telecoil, clients need vertically oriented telecoils. They need a telecoil with a frequency response that matches the microphone response. I'm really going to refer you to a class I gave on audiology online that goes into more of the technical details here. I'm also happy to answer anybody's questions, or if you would like me to share more information on that. But the good news is that in most hearing aids, the telecoil is now oriented vertically. This shows a resound hearing aid. This shows, I think it's a Unitron instrument with a telecoil that is oriented in such a way that when it's hanging on the ear, the telecoil is nice and plumb. When you're programming telecoils, here's a little bit of advice. If you're programming telecoils for someone with a more open fit, I recommend that you only give them a telecoil only. They do not need the extra microphone. Enough sound is going to enter the ear that's really not necessary. So you just give a T-coil only program. And then you need to consider the situation. Is it for a house of worship? Is it for an HLAA meeting where they're going to be hearing people around them? Is it because they just installed the loop in their TV room and they want to hear their partners? Do they want to hear music in their telecoil? Because you can couple the telecoil to a music program. You can couple the telecoil to the microphone so that they hear both. And you also need to consider their degree of hearing loss and their word discrimination. So as a rule, for RIC and open fittings, I do T coil only. For more social situations where they need to hear their seatmate or their own voice when they're singing in church, I give them an MT program. But if they have poor discrimination, and you know that St. Mary's in your town of Anna Courts has poor acoustics, then you want to give them a telecoil program and reduce that microphone gain to reduce the background noise pickup. Or, better yet, teach your clients to use the app in the smartphone. A lot of new hearing aids have the ability to do a mix between the microphone and the telecoil. And I've seen users use that feature, and they really appreciate it once they figure out what it's for. To verify telecoils, you need a hitbox. So you either need a Verifit, you need an Oracle, you need a Unity box from Siemens or Signia, and there's a couple of handouts floating around that I've helped develop. If you own a hitbox, if you own a Verifit or a Verifit 2, you can verify telecoils in less than 2 minutes. And I'm happy to send you the handout on that. Send me an email. But if you don't have a hitbox, we're going to talk about how you can validate telecoils. And of course, what's this all about? It's all about educating our clients that hearing aids are not the end all. They are not the only solution for better hearing, that they really need to avail themselves of all kinds of options. And I love this quote. It came from an audiologist in Lafayette, Indiana. That community had 0 hearing loops, and there's 30 or 40 hearing loops just in Lafayette alone when they started educating their patients about it. But it also made their patients more open, more receptive to trying other technology. So you may be sitting there going, I've heard about LE audio, and I hear it is just around the corner. And it's going to be the replacement for hearing loops and telecoils. Let me remind you that about 12 years ago, AHIMA and HIA came out with a news release to say that they were nearly there. New technology was just around the corner. That was 12 years ago, and it's still not there. LE audio will probably first work in systems like laptops, smartphones, smart TVs, and new hearing aids. So everybody has to have a new TV, a new laptop, a new smartphone, and new hearing aids. And then coupling between those devices without a dongle is going to be a lot easier. But it's going to be a very long time before the technology will work with every make and model hearing aid in public venues. The talk right now is that that transition is going to be between 10 and 15 years. But again, I want to remind you that 5 to 10 year time frame has been discussed as probably as long as many of you have been in practice. So we anticipate that that's not going to happen overnight. So here's where I'm going to get to some of the law, and I hope that there's lots of state of Washington dispensers online. You are going to be required in the future, because of the law change, to educate patients with handouts. And the law is written in such a way that you are not required to use a standard handout or something that's going to be developed by the Office for the Deaf and the Hard of Hearing in Washington. You can also use a handout that's been developed by you, or by a hearing aid manufacturer. And in this case, I'm showing you a handout developed by HLAA. There's a number of different handouts available. So if you think, well, you know what? I want to be the one that's going to foster a loop in my community or in my own house of worship. These handouts have done so in many, many locations. And if you're interested, some of these handouts are available free of charge. You email me and we'll be happy to send you packets of these handouts for your office for you to share with your patients. Other ways that you can foster more loops and also make your clients more aware that hearing aids need sometimes help, a little bit like wheelchairs, sometimes need wheelchair ramps or elevators. And these are these share the gift of hearing cards. My patients drop these cards off in lots of different places when they couldn't hear. It gives them permission to complain that they can't hear, and the card explains why that's the case. If you'd like a generic version of this, email me. I'm happy to share them with you. I also want to make you aware that hearing loops initiatives are happening around the country. There's over 30 states that have started hearing loops initiatives. And if you live in Washington, there's an extremely active group doing that. And yes, there are legal requirements emerging around the country. And really, these are consumers who are working these laws, and there's a number of different laws that are being changed. Some of them are assistive listening system laws. So, for example, in the state of Minnesota, the go-to technology are hearing loops. If the facility is state funded, the law states that the hearing loop should be the go-to technology. Some laws are requiring that dispensers and audiologists get continuing education credits in the topic of assistive listening and telecoils. The state of New York is one of those states. So every 2 years, audiologists and dispensers are required to take a class in this topic. And then there are dispensing laws, just like in your state of Washington. The law requires that you now follow certain procedures to inform your patients. But it's really in a response to educated consumers who are finding out that when ordinary hearing aid users join HLAA chapters, one of the first things they get asked or get told is, whoa, welcome to our HLAA meeting. We have a hearing loop here. Turn on your telecoil. And the standard question these typical consumers say or ask is, what's a telecoil? They don't know what's a telecoil. Now, they may have been told, they don't remember. So hearing is believing. My experience is that if you demonstrate what the telecoil is for, if you educate a wheelchair user that the wheelchair works better if it's coupled to a ramp or to an elevator, they're going to say, why would I want to live in a house that doesn't have ramps or elevators? So your law states, in the state of Washington, that is, that prior to the initial fitting and purchase, a person needs to be educated both orally and in writing about the uses and benefits of and the limitations of hearing aids as defined by the Department of Health. Then each person who signs a purchase contract, on the contract, it needs to state, on the receipt is what you call it, it needs to state, there needs to be language on your contract that verifies that both prior to ordering the hearing aid, and at the time of fitting, the consumer was educated both verbally and in writing, in other words, in the form of a handout, about the uses and benefits and limitations of hearing assistive technologies. Now, the limitations of hearing aids. Trust me, the moment your patient walks out of a hearing aid or walks into a very noisy restaurant, they're going to find out the limitations. They need to hear this from you, and not just that the hearing aids have limitations, but you have a workaround. You have a solution. You have ways that they can hear better in those places through the use of assistive technology. And by the way, yes, in the state of Washington, you may either produce your own materials, you may use materials that have been produced by hearing aid manufacturers or others, or you may use materials that are being developed and are nearly done by the Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing in your state. So the handout that Rick Giles sent me, thank you, Rick. Um, you you probably won't recognize it after we got done with it. But what I try to do is make it a handout that is consumer friendly. So it allows you to circle or to highlight. It allows you to point to the symbol that says if it has a T, it's a hearing loop. If there is no T, you need to go to the front desk and pick up a device. But there's also been a great handout in the Hearing Journal written by Steve Fraser. You can find it on the web, and you have permission to copy that handout. And again, that handout too talks about hearing loops, RF systems, FM systems, IR systems, Wi-Fi systems, and again, it shows the hearing loop symbol. So you do not have to fret about this. The information is already there. Now, a couple of ways to educate your patients. Use a loop in your waiting room. I installed the hearing loop in my waiting room with a sign that says turn on your telecoil, and it was fun. Patients would walk into my waiting room and just sit down and turn their telecoil on and start watching TV. You can educate patients about the telecoil and the benefits of the telecoil by giving them a call at home on their landline. I hear more than 50% of clients over the age of 75 still own landlines. Use a counter loop, like I showed you earlier, a loop that you can put on your front desk, or you can have it right in your office. That also allows you to validate the telecoil. Refer clients to HLAA chapters if you are lucky to have one in your area, and keep a list. Keep a list in your office where assistive technology is used, right? And I have one request for all of you who are here. Please, 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 next time you go to the theater, and I know it could be a while, but next time you go to the theater, please pick up an assistive listening device. Listen to what it sounds like, how it works for you. And I can tell you from experience, your local theater will want your opinion, because they're putting these systems in, and then they find out that consumers don't use them. The reason consumers don't use them, they're not aware of them because we don't educate them about it. Just to show you a couple of places where you can find hearing loops, timetoloopamerica.com, aldlocator.com, and Loopfinder are all sites that show hearing loops. And I want to show you the Seattle area where there are a ton of hearing loops. I also have some good news. Google Accessibility, the team that wants Google to be more accessible for people who are handicapped or live with handicaps, is looking to make accessible locations and a number of different type of technologies listed on Google Maps. We think that that's great news. I want to close by saying Wisconsin had very few loops in 2011. Right now we have over or close to 800 hearing loops. Worldwide, we're looking at 3 to 5 million hearing loops. In the US, in the last decade, about 20,000 loops have been installed since 2008. But it's not just about hearing loops. It's also about the devices that are being used with neck loops. But here's the real reason there are hearing loops in Wisconsin. And there's no way I could have done this on my own. And these are the hearing care professionals, including Todd Beyer, right here in Wisconsin Rapids, who's been incredibly supportive of my efforts and is educating his patients. My clients love it. I can't say enough, like I said, about their comments. They're on my website if you're interested. I have a few more recommendations of what you can do to make your community more accessible, but I'm going to run out of time really, really fast. If you're interested in some of these handouts, I'm happy to share them with you. But our aim, the Get in the Hearing Loops Committee's aim, is not to promote hearing loops per se, but to promote directly hearing aid compatible assistive technology. And for the near future, that's going to be hearing loops, or at least telecoils, and either neck and or hearing loops. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I have now met hundreds of HLAA members, and they are a phenomenally welcoming message. If you have consumers who are very hard of hearing, so many will tell me HLAA was a lifesaver. It was incredible. It's isolating to be hard of hearing and to then find a community with people who are just like you. Many of their lectures are online. Put them on your Facebook, put them on your social media. Your clients will love you for it. So that brings me to 3 minutes of answering my continuing education questions, Rick.
All right.
Can we do it?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much. I think that should be fairly simple. A couple of people asked for her email address. It's on the screen. I will copy that down and get it to you as well through the chat. And so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to go over a couple of the questions that we have for the assessment. So I'm going to stop this one and share my screen.
Thank you for all staying awake. It's been a long day, no doubt.
So again, the Department of Health passed the rule, finalized the rule on February 18th. That means you have 30 days from February 18th to have your contracts change. Just a few moments ago, I forwarded a PDF of a full contract the way it's supposed to be. You need to add section number 4 to the existing. The rest of the contracts have not changed since we eliminated the need for initialing each paragraph. But as far as the assessment questions go, why do hearing aid users prefer hearing loops over the conventional hearing assisted listening devices? They use FM or infrared. And I think that all 4 of those is probably the most logical choice. Are we correct?
You are.
All right. The next question is when programming the T coil setting, it's important to consider, and I'm guessing it's the type of hearing loss.
It's actually the situation the consumer is in. So if the consumer is in a highly reverberant church, you would want to program a T program. But if they go to an HLAA meeting, you would want to give them an M plus T setting.
Oh, I see. So it's M plus T versus just T.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. And the third question is the characteristics of telecoils is such that they, I think would be, we would all say that it would increase the consumer satisfaction.
Yeah, they don't increase the drain on the battery. They are worldwide technology. They do not require the user to pick up a device. and are easy to activate. My mother, 94, can push a button, but Lord, don't give her a smartphone with her hearing aids or we're in deep trouble, you know.
Right. Are there any other questions for Juliette?
And I would love to hear Brian Taylor. You have a phenomenal lineup for your lectures. Can I stay on, Rick?
Absolutely. We're glad to have you. Okay, I will post in the chat Juliette's email address. And if you have other questions for her, you can chat me back and I will ask her directly.
And I'm going to make sure those handouts get to you right away.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'd like to get them to everybody before the end of the day, if that's possible at all.
Yeah.
Okay. The next class is going to start in 15 minutes. So you have a 15-minute break to get a glass of water, or I don't know, it's a little early for me for a glass of wine, but it's rapidly approaching that time.
It's getting there.
I think, Rick, if we can get the sample, any of the documents too, and just let everybody know here that we will, I'll work with Ken at Steam, to get them put up, and we'll put a tab on the website from the summit of the forms and links for everybody going forward.
And the presentations as well, the ones that have been supplied to us. I just a few moments ago did email out a sample of the purchase agreement. So look in your emails. If you can't see it in your general email, check your spam or your junk folder, because I think a lot of my emails are ending up in those places. Don't know why, but sometimes they are. So we'll see you back in 15 minutes.
Juliette, if I may ask or make a couple comments.
Sure, Gus.
Meg and I were back in DC for a series of meetings with the International Hearing Society. And in spending time back there, we went to the National Cathedral. The reverberation was phenomenal. I could not understand anything. When we finished, Meg looked over and said, "Oh, we should have sat there. It's looped." She would have done much better, but it wouldn't have helped me because I didn't have my T Coils turned on.
Yeah.
So I get back home and I turn them on. We go to a theater production. The theater was looped. And unfortunately, the microphone was hanging at the front of the stage. And whenever anybody said anything in the audience, it came booming in. It was just way too loud.
Yeah.
And okay, I need to adjust that. But it was not a pleasant experience. Even when they came on with the play, it was a little bit loud, but definitely the audition was much better. But it was kind of a shock to hear everybody in the audience chatting away, and it was like, whoa, that's too much. So anyway, I've had good and bad experiences with it, and definitely appreciate it when the equipment's all set to go and it's programmed right. So,
and you bring up a really good point. Can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah.
You bring up a really good point, because I have fought that same issue in my local theater called the Grand Opera House. I went to a Thanksgiving service, a community service, ecumenical. So there were different ministers talking, and I walk in with my mother. My mother had just gotten hearing aids with T Coils. Of course, I see 10 different patients sitting, and they're all going, telecoil, right? Because they know I've been looping and the grand is looped. And I tell you, the event starts and the signal was not routed through the loop. It was only routed through the PA system. I mean, people were pushing their button. They're all looking at me. And I mean, honest, one of my most embarrassing moments. But the best thing that happened was that my clients reached out to the director of the grant. It wasn't me. They reached out to him and said, "We couldn't hear, and I can hear fine in church every Sunday. There's something wrong with your loop." And so they would have never said this if they hadn't had the experience in their house of worship every Sunday. They wouldn't have felt confident to say something. So it makes them more verbal. But I've had it happen again in the same place. The audio engineer, for some reason, doesn't always turn on the signal that goes to the loop unless they see my face in the audience. But it's a work in progress. I've been in theaters in the round where it was looped and the sound was exquisite. I mean, I could hear everything that was happening on the stage. So it really depends on the audio engineer and the kinds of microphones that they're using. And of course, that can vary. That makes churches the place where hearing loops shine, of course, but theaters want to do what's right. And with your feedback, they're going to do that. And I know audio engineers, so if you have questions about this, I can get you in contact with the right people. Happy to help you.
There was one situation that I was in where I don't know that I was a caregiver, but I got a phone call about a patient asking, does this patient's hearing aid have a telecoil? The first question I asked was what model or what brand of hearing aid? And they came back with Phonak.
Okay.
I said, yeah. And if it's not turned on, it's just a matter of turning it on. I was just happy that at that time, basically everything that Phonak had a telecoil in it. It was just a matter of making sure it was turned on for them.
When I started looping, 90% of my hearing aids were Widex. And they were all the Divas and Inteos, for those of you who are familiar with Widex. And even the custom hearing aids all came standard with a perfectly plumb telecoil. So basically, I would do events, bring my laptop, and just turn telecoils on right on the spot. I was very lucky in those days.
Well, speaking,
I would like to say thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome. You're
Rick,
welcome.
back to you.
speaking as a volunteer for a church that does the audio, I'm on the audio tech team. Sometimes we forget to turn up the T coil.
Yeah.
And it's not anything we do on purpose. It's just
Nope.
we forget. So feel free to tell your patients to ask. They're more than happy to accommodate.
Yeah. Well, happy to answer any more questions afterwards or via email. I have a ton of information, and I'm very willing to share.
And she will get